Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good day to all my students out there. I really hope that you're going to have a very good day today because you're going to be with me, Teacher Zuraini Arifin, aka Teacher Dizak from SMK Kemumin, Kota Baru, Kelantan. Today we are going to learn about an interesting topic that is phrasal verbs. By the end of this lesson, hopefully all of you will be able to first give the definition of the phrasal verbs, second identify the different types of phrasal verbs, and third complete the task given by using the correct phrasal verbs. And this task is very special because it is a self-check task. First of all, we need to know what are phrasal verbs. When we are talking about phrase, it means it is more than one word, and when we are talking about verbs, that means it involves actions. So phrasal verbs are phrases that indicate actions. A phrasal verb is a combination of words, first between a verb and a preposition, second between a verb and an adverb. When used together, phrasal verbs usually take on a different meaning to that of the original verb, which means added to the verb, the preposition and the adverb may change completely the meaning of the verb. First, let us make this clear. Before we proceed with our phrasal verbs, we need to know what are the definitions of verbs, prepositions and adverbs. Verbs are words that describe an action, for example, to swim or to read, or words that describe a state of being, for example, to live or to understand. What about preposition? Preposition are small words that describe the relationship between two words. For example, the book is on the chair. So the first word is the book and the second word is the chair. So the preposition on shows the relationship between these two words. Preposition can cover time, location, place or direction, and also movement. And finally, adverbs. Adverbs are words that describe verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs. Difficult to understand the meaning of phrasal verbs? Not to worry, we are at the early stage. First of all, we can always use a dictionary, of course, because we are learning a language. And second, the beauty of language is that we can use the context to understand the phrasal verbs that is used in the sentence. Phrasal verbs have two meanings. Some of the phrasal verbs have literal meaning and some of them have the idiomatic meaning. What is literal meaning? Literal meaning means something that we heard or we read and it carries the literal meaning of the sentence. For example, Dina was walking across the street when she heard the sound of an explosion. So we can actually picture the action done by Dina. She was walking across the street. And some phrasal verbs also have the idiomatic meaning. Let us take a look at this example. Can you put me up for tonight? Literally, put up means to build up something, for example, to build a fence up. But in this case, can you put me up for tonight carries an idiomatic meaning, which means can you have me tonight at your place or at your home. So I have made it clear to you that phrasal verbs can have literal meaning and some of them can have the idiomatic meaning. Okay, boys and girls, we have started our lesson for today by giving the definition of the phrasal verbs, and I have already mentioned to you that some phrasal verbs can carry out the literal meaning and some of them can have the figurative meaning or idiomatic meaning. Next, we are going to look at the types of phrasal verbs. Now students, we are going to look at the different types of phrasal verbs. First, we have the transitive phrasal verbs, and second, we have the intransitive phrasal verbs. We are going to look at the transitive phrasal verbs first. Transitive phrasal verbs means a sentence must have an object. Transitive phrasal verbs either can be separated, that is the particle. The particle here is referring to the preposition or the adverb that we use together with the verbs. can be separated from the verb by the direct object, and some of the transitive phrasal verbs cannot be separated. Let us take a look at the first example here. You can leave out the details because I just want to know the main event. Leave out is the phrasal verbs. The details is the object. That makes this sentence as the transitive phrasal verbs used in a sentence. And I am referring to the second bullet point just now when I said that some transitive phrasal verbs can be separated. That is, the particle can be separated from the verb by the direct object. So referring to that one, we can take a look at the example here. You can leave the details out. Now we are separating the phrasal verbs into two by using the object, the details. So the sentence becomes, you can leave the details out because I just want to know the main event, and still the sentence carry the same meaning as the first sentence. Now take a look at the second example here. The 5C students went over the material before the exam. For this example, we are going to refer to the third bullet point in our notes, which some of the transitive phrasal verbs cannot be separated. If you try to separate the phrasal verbs in this sentence, the 5C students went the material over before the exam, the sentence is going to be ungrammatical. Come, let us take a look at more on transitive phrasal verbs, which, as I mentioned earlier, are separable and some of them are inseparable. For separable transitive phrasal verbs, we need to bear in mind that the object may come after the phrasal verbs, or it may separate the two parts of the phrasal verbs. And this is the second example. The terrorists tried to blow up the village. Correct. A tick to that sentence. Or we can break the phrasal verb into two. The terrorists tried to blow the village up, and the meaning is still the same. But you need to remember, when the object of the phrasal verb is a pronoun, the two parts of the phrasal verb must be separated. It is a compulsory for us to separate the phrasal verbs when the object is a pronoun. Let us take a look at this example. The terrorists tried to blow the village up, and I changed the village into the pronoun it. So the sentence will be, the terrorists tried to blow it up. So if you do not separate the two phrasal verbs, the sentence will sound like this. The terrorists tried to blow up it. It sounds very awkward, right? And it is ungrammatical. Now we are going to look at the second part of the transitive phrasal verbs, that is the inseparable transitive phrasal verb. With the inseparable phrasal verbs, the lexical part of the verb cannot be separated from the prepositions that accompany it. For example, who will look after my family when I'm gone for the long course? Look after is the phrasal verb. My family is the object. Try to break this up. Who will look my family after when I'm gone for the long course? Again, it becomes ungrammatical sentence. Next, we are going to look at the second type of phrasal verb, that is intransitive phrasal verb. A sentence with an intransitive phrasal verb does not have an object, which is different from transitive phrasal verb just now. For example here, we use just to drop by, but my uncle was never home, so we stopped doing that. Where is the object of the sentence? There is no object because this is intransitive phrasal verbs used in a sentence. The word parts that make up an intransitive phrasal verb cannot be separated. They are inseparable. This is another example for intransitive phrasal verb. We are going to look at the phrasal verb break up, which means to end a relationship. They broke up 2 years ago. Correct, because the phrasal verbs are combined together. If you try to separate the phrasal verbs, it will sound like this. They broke 2 years ago up. So this is an incorrect sentence. So remind ourselves, intransitive phrasal verbs are inseparable. But learning language, there will always be exceptionals to the rules. Some of the phrasal verbs can be a bit of both, can be transitive and can be intransitive. For example, phrasal verb look up, the first one. Look up means find out information. For example, Madam Murni asked her students to look up the words in their dictionaries. Look up is the phrasal verb and the words is the object that makes it a transitive phrasal verb. Another meaning for look up is to improve or to get better. After a terrible week, Amani's health seems to be improving. Things are looking up. Teacher, where is the object? Of course, there is no object because this is the intransitive phrasal verb used in the sentence. So boys and girls, I have made things clear for you about the transitive and also the intransitive phrasal verbs. Next, we are going to look at different aspects of phrasal verbs. Okay, now we are going to look at the different aspects of phrasal verbs. One phrasal verb may have more than one meaning. Okay, let us take a look at this example. Phrasal verbs of workout. Workout can mean, the first one, to exercise. The athlete works out at the gym at least 5 times a week. The second meaning of workout is to understand. The new employee is able to work out on how to use the machine after being guided by the colleague. And the third meaning of the phrasal verb workout is to be successful. We were happy because our plan had worked out fine. So, can you see that one phrasal verb can have more than one meaning? Let us take a look at the second example of a phrasal verb with more than one meaning. Take off. The first meaning of take off is to increase sharply. The manager was happy because the sales took off after the marketing promotion. The second meaning of take off is to remove something. Adib took off his clothes immediately after coming back from the hike. And the third meaning of take off is to not work for a period of time. Iman has taken a month off work because he needs to take care of his mother. Can you think of another meaning of take off? Can we say the plane took off on time? Yes, that is another meaning of take off. That means to start flying. So one phrasal verb has more than one meaning. Now, you might ask me, teacher, how will I know which is which? Responding to the question just now, how will I know which is which? My first advice will be, memorize the different meanings, which will make all of you shout, teacher, how come we memorize hundreds of phrasal verbs? Not to worry. Go to our second advice, that is always use a good English dictionary because we are learning language. And my third advice would be, once you are familiar with the different meanings, you will be able to work out the meaning from the context the phrasal verb is used in. So the more you expose yourself to the language, the better language user you will be. Why not spare some of your precious time to look at these common phrasal verbs? Break down, show off, ask around, run into, call on, put out, turn down, pass out, and finally take after. Just spare some of your time to find the meaning of these words and then try to decide whether they are transitive or intransitive phrasal verbs. And again, try to write them down in a sentence to make sure that you are able to apply these phrasal verbs in your essay later on. How are you feeling right now? Are you feeling lost by phrasal verbs? Confused, unsure, unclear, perplexed, disoriented, and bewildered? Not to worry, my dear. Let us recap our lesson for today. Phrasal verbs, remind ourselves, is the combinations of words. First, between a verb and a preposition. Second, between a verb and an adverb. Phrasal verbs have a literal meaning and also idiomatic meaning. For example, pick up. Please pick up that book. Literally, it means to take up by hand. And the second meaning is the literal meaning. My luck has picked up. That means to improve and getting better. Phrasal verbs also have two types. The first one is the transitive phrasal verbs, in which it has a direct object and some are inseparable and some are separable. For example, please stop making up excuses is correct, but you cannot split them into two. Please stop making excuses up. So this example is the inseparable transitive phrasal verb. The second example, pull down. They pull down the house, correct? They pull the house down, also correct. So this goes to the separable transitive phrasal verbs. And the next type of phrasal verbs that you need to know is the intransitive phrasal verbs. It does not have an object, and the rule is that intransitive phrasal verbs are inseparable. For example, they made up after their bitter argument, which means to resolve a quarrel. But if you try to separate the phrasal verbs they met after their bitter argument up, it becomes ungrammatical sentence. So this is the gist of what we have learned for today. Okay, boys and girls, we have covered the two objectives just now, which I mentioned. The first one is to give the definition of phrasal verb, and second one is to give the types of phrasal verbs. And we are going to cover up our third objective, that is to leave you with the self-assessed quiz on phrasal verb. Okay, my dear students, this is the link to self-check quiz on phrasal verbs. Why not try gg.gg/phrasal-verbs-dissect, or you can always scan the QR code here to go to the self-check quiz. So my boys and girls, we come to the end of our session for this lesson. I really hope that you're going to do the test, self-checked on how you have understood our lesson for today. And hopefully, we are going to meet again, because remember, learning never ends. See you. Bye.